Hi all, let's have a look at an epic encounter in the TCEC Cup 2nd edition. This is round 5. Leela qualified for the final by beating the great Komodo chess engine. So Houdini had also qualified by beating, remarkably, to everyone's shock and horror, Stockfish. Even though Houdini hasn't been updated for over a year, and Stockfish has multiple developers, more than 10 I believe, and it's been having loads of updates, it managed to lose for some reason. Perhaps small sample size had a big thing to do with that. It managed to lose to Houdini, so Leela versus Houdini was the final. And this is game 5, so played yesterday. Over 1,200 people were watching this epic game. Let's have a look. D4 from Leela. D5, C4, E6. So we have Queen's Gambit decline territory, the Slav triangle, D takes A4, bishop B4, E3, B5. This is the end of the book given. Now we have bishop D2, so that unpins the knight. And now we have A5, A takes B. And if black dared to play C takes, then knight takes B5 looks very possible. So black gives up the bishop. This has all been seen before in over-the-board chess. Bishop takes C3, keeping the pressure on A5. B takes C3 is actually significantly inferior. For example, this position, black's extra pawn, this restricted bishop, white hasn't got really much compensation going here. For example, Queen F3 can be met with Queen D5. Black's got a big advantage there. So it's important to maintain the pressure. And also the loose rook on A8 can sometimes be useful in some of the variations. So C takes here, B3, as an example of the loose rook on A8. If B4, then white can play bishop takes B4 with that pin and play that. So here, after B3, black ought not play C takes because of bishop takes B5 check, and that's very nice for white. So bishop B7, black is returning the pawn. Bishop B2, this is a slightly unusual move actually. Usually players just play B takes C4, and the bishop ends up on B2 anyway. So we have a potential transposition now. After knight F6 we do actually transpose into that. B takes B4. So what's happened here? Black has actually 2 connected passed pawns, so they should be immobilized in theory, blockaded, and white has an extra pawn in the center. Basically, in fact, if we take there's 3-1 in the center and there's 2-0 here, so an interesting structural imbalance in this position. We see bishop D3 and black castled. If black tries to make use of that E4 square, it seems unwise here. For example, knight E4 check, putting the bishop on C6 and bringing the queen back to hit E4. This is unpleasant because of D5. For example, this position is extremely unpleasant before black's even castled. There's big trouble there. And if we look at this position again, if knight D7, there's C5 with the idea of C6. So this knight can be a liability. For example, here's C6, and that'll be winning a piece. So if we check out also bishop E4, I believe white can gain an advantage, for example, playing like this with a quick D5. So there's no easy way for black to just entrench a knight on E4, basically playing like this, and this bishop is quite lethal on this diagonal potentially. Big advantage to white. So black just castles, white castles, knight BD7. Again here, any idea of using E4, which seems in some way attractive. It seems white has enough to keep the game going with a quick D5 break. So if E takes rook D1 looks good, and if here knight D4, this looks quite nice for white, small edge at least. So knight BD7, and now that E4 square is officially contested more to stop this stuff. Queen C7, and the bishop drops back, so the knight's also holding up C4, making this possible to blockade the pawns. So black's pawns are being kept under lock and key, and C4 is not entirely vulnerable just yet. H6. We have rook E1, rook FE8, H3, and now black plays E5. This does tend to encourage the white pawn center. D5 is played. Okay, it weakens C5 a bit, But black also, it seems black's tempted by this as though c4 is an issue. White just ignores this, just reinforces the center with e4. And you might find this a little bit of a surprise. Rook e8. The thing is, the queen's kind of committed to holding e5 here and the rook. And if knight takes c4, white can actually play knight takes, which drags the queen away from e5, then play bishop a4 to try and drag the rook away from e5. So for example here, this is good. And then taking on e5, getting a big advantage there. If we look at these variations a bit more, here, if rook e7, then there's d6. And then, in fact, in this position, there's a remarkable queen sack, which maybe both engines, they saw this kind of deep stuff. This isn't just theoretical when we're talking engine games. It seems here white has a very strong idea, believe it or not. I wonder if you can guess, what would you play here? There's a really strong idea. Actually, let me show you, get further into this position. It's here after giving up the bishop. 5 seconds, what would you play here? Okay, best move is actually rook d6. Try and take on f6 and then queen. So for example here, rook takes f6, big advantage. So there's really fascinating variations here. If queen c5 instead, so when we play this queen c5 instead to try and get that pawn, rook d7 here, yeah, so if takes then there's queening. If here, this is strong for white, so for slightly different reasons, white's just getting a load of material. So it seems all a bit dangerous, this stuff with knight takes c4, remarkably. So we have rook ec8, just ignoring c4. Rook c1, knight fd7. Now taking here runs into knight takes, queen takes, bishop d3, and simply after queen a2, taking on c8 to take on e5, taking out this pawn. The pawns are actually more significant, and there's black's king is in trouble potentially, and there's rook lifts. This is too dangerous for black. So knight fd7, we have rook e3, a rook lift anyway. Now black does try and use the 2-0 pawn majority, the two connected passed pawns. Taking on c4 here, knight takes, queen takes, bishop a4 hits d7 as well as the queen. And here bishop takes wins the exchange. So if rook takes, bishop takes, and if here, then just winning the exchange. Big advantage for white. So a4. So that c4 has never been, it seems, possible to take advantageously. We have rook g3, g6, and now really energetic queen h5. Interesting stuff. So queen h5, king h7 is played. It seems a3, white might only have enough to draw here with a rook sack. If black plays carefully with king e7, then it seems only a draw. If black doesn't play carefully in this position with king g8, then white can sacrifice the bishop to get this rook left in with a good attack. It's a strong attack, for example, like this. Really strong. But it should be just the draw. If a3, but white can, instead of sacking the rook, just play bishop a1 basically, and still keep all the prospects. The pawns are kind of not too dangerous just yet. We have king h7 though in this game continuation. Now queen f3 looks at f7. If black plays knight f8, that lets the queen slip into f6, and e5 is under fire. So rook e8, d6 disconnects the queen from e5, and then white can take on e5, big advantage. So f6 insulates the f6 square as well as protecting the pawn. We have h4, queen d6. Anytime a3, there's bishop a1, so that's not a big problem. So h5, g5 is played. If black is playing g takes, I mean structurally it looks like a rack, but just for the record, check taking is just a nightmare, because white can just put a knight on g6 to win the queen, for example, and yeah, it's devastating. So g5, keeping things closed down, it seems, but weakening the light squares a bit. We have check, and now a really shocking move. I wonder if you can guess if I give you 5 seconds. Okay. F4, yeah, it's really kind of weakening black's structure, black's fortress-like structure. A3 is played. On knight takes c4, knight takes, rook takes, there's queen g6. And here, it's interesting, this position, f takes, bishop takes, rook f1, is really demonstrating white's attacking pressure. For example, if queen takes, then crashing through like this. So this is already dangerous, actually. Let's have a look at that again. So there's queen g6 check, and queen f8. If queen e7, f takes, knight takes, check, and yeah, black's getting dismantled here. It doesn't matter about the queens coming off. Black's still in big trouble here. The pawns are not quick enough to do anything before black gets mated. Before that, anything happens with these pawns. So yeah, there's fascinating variations with knight takes c4. If e takes f4, this is a lot of fun with rook takes g5. So for example, then e5, which opens up this bishop on h7, so queen h7 mate. So yeah, this is very, very much, it's very entertaining. Also strong e5 here, just immediately hitting the queen, and if check here, this is also leading to a disaster for black as well. For example, like this, there's too much attack pressure there. So yeah, f4, yeah, dramatic move. So we checked out knight takes c4 and e takes. On g takes, there's rook g6 simply, and here there's actually a stunning bishop d4 to drag the queen officially away from h6. After king f1, for example, here, just taking check, queen e6, and black's getting mated. So f4, it seems to work in all variations. It seems to be very good in these variations shown. So a3 is played. And now we have bishop dropping back, queen e7, f takes e5. White's knocking on the doors here of black's king side. Knight takes. Bishop b3. Look how these bishops are kind of pointed in that direction. And c5 looks like a really dangerous idea, potentially. At the moment it's blockaded. Knight bd7, knight f3. Queen h7. Now fascinating move, queen h3. This seems to invite g4. Black played rook f8. If g4, guess what white plays if I give you 5 seconds here to pause the video. Knight takes e5. This is really stunning stuff. After takes, knight takes d7. Look at this unleashing pressure on f6. So for example, queen takes, bishop takes, e5. This is really big threats like bishop c2 now. So say queen f5, bishop c2 wins the queen, and white plays that check, takes bishop up. Black's pawns are too slow here, and in fact that can be taken. White ends up with a massive advantage. So g4 doesn't seem to work. Yeah, because of knight takes e5. If knight takes e5 instead, bishop takes, taking the queen again. This is bad. White gets the queen back, and again some mechanisms like this. d6 check. This is all pretty nasty for black. Check, mate, there. And let's have a look at this fun again. A slight variation here. After check here, if king g8, rook e7 is going to check. Just taking here, bishop takes, and black's getting mated actually. Okay, black's 2 bishops down, just for fun to put it on the board. So yeah, there's a lot of fascinating stuff with g4. It just doesn't seem to work because of this diagonal. This lurking bishop, blockading bishop, is also on the attack on this diagonal. Rook f8. So this is a rich character in this film. It's got a lot of sides to it. So rook f8. Knight takes e5. Knight takes. Rook e3, which officially protects that pawn. By the way, another little story here about queen h3. On the subject of e4, let's just mention queen takes e4. There's knight takes, rook e3. So this puts the pressure on, and after bishop takes, that just wins material. Yeah, it's too much. Okay, so yeah, back to the game. Knight takes, rook e3, protecting that pawn. Bishop a6. What's happened to the c5 blockade? It's just disappeared, basically. Queen g3, putting more pressure on e5. And now, after this, we have bishop d4. This bishop is getting into, all of a sudden from a1, it's got ambitions to go into d6, basically to enter black's position. It's the one piece that wants to make an entry into black's position. And it's also the one piece without a counterpart. There's no dark square bishop for black. Is that some clue to some of the secrets of chess? If you've got the bishop without the counterpart, do quite a lot with it. Queen g7, bishop c5, it goes into black's position. Rook b8, black just offers the exchange here. If rook f7, then bishop takes b4. Yummy. These pawns are being munched. Okay, so that's too dangerous. And there's ways of protecting, well, the rook's protecting the bishop, so that pawn's necked. So rook b8. White's not interested, though. Bishop d6, interested in the rook on f8. Looking at forking both rooks just for fun. Rook fd8 is played. On rook b7, just c5 is actually probably better than taking the rook. Then take here, and then just play d6. And this is massive for white. Absolutely massive position. So we have rook fd8. Now, finally the bishop gives itself up. It did some good stuff there behind the scenes. Rook e1, queen e7. Rook e d1, king g7. c5 finally. These pawns look like they're more mobile than black's pawns. Bishop b5, queen e3, knight g4. This goes into a pin, actually. Yeah, it looks as though black's getting run over anyway with things like c6, so this looks like a desperate position. It's not great for going to a self pin in general. Rook a8, without a good reason. Here, if the offer of queens, white could gladly take that and play c6, big advantage. So rook a8, rook e1, rook f8. Bishop d1, forcing the queens off for c6 basically, is now possible, but rook e3 was played better, which is maybe better because of avoiding knight d3. Even with c6 allowing knight d3, it's still good for white, by the way, but this is more accurate. c6 is not going away anytime soon, so this keeps a lock on that knight. Rook c8, c6, bishop e8, rook b1. Black's falling apart now, it's official. Knight c4, very desperate move. If rook b8, for example, rook takes a3, uses the pin. So knight c4, rook d3, knight b2, rook b3. Yeah, these pawns are just weak. They're weak now. a2, gives up the exchange. White gives up the exchange to win some pawns, leaving crushing connected pass pawns for white only. Basically, black's pawns are being cleared off the board here. b3, bishop g4. And yeah, if the rook moves c7 or yeah, just taking a rook b7 later, it's terrible. So the rook gives itself up. It's completely hopeless now. Rook down. After bishop f5 here, the game ended here. So massive advantage, of course, a whole rook up. There's no point carrying on there. Both engines thought was absolutely winning. So with this win, Leela won its first official TCEC competition. This TCEC Cup, second edition, not won by the mighty Stockfish. Stockfish dramatically knocked out by Houdini 6.03. in the earlier round in the semi-final. So there's a fantastic puzzle book for some of the amazing variations of this game at Chessboard. If you check out the improved menu, log in at Chessboard, the improved menu, there's puzzle books. It's also on the play menu as well, play puzzle books. So a load of interesting puzzles you can check out. You can also check out the raw analysis, of course, as well from the improved menu. Learn from the Masters YouTube order button, you'll find it there. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Click on the top left box to become a member at chessboard.net and try that stuff out. Comments, questions, donations, see the description. Like, share, subscribes with the notification bell. Really appreciated. Thanks very much.